This is a quick follow-up to yesterday's film, just because I was leading up to something with the treatment of this ceiling in here and how we're going to frame those walls and how we're going to frame that ceiling. And this film just does a little bit of that, reviews essentially what the options are, and then shows some different alternatives with various things with the windows, and covers a few other things as well. So yesterday we had started with something like this, and when we got to the end, I did anyway, I added a foot to the length of it. That does not have to happen, but I added that to give that dining space a little bit more of its own room. But in terms of this ceilings now, all these section views that we're looking at very briefly is elevation 19 looking that way. And so this was the first one where we had 8-foot kitchen ceilings and 9-foot great room ceilings, and this presumably is how the truss would be built, something like this. An alternative is just to build that entire this whole wall and this wall at 9 feet and just have one simple truss over the whole thing, which is probably going to be less expensive than that. So if you did build those walls, just assuming a person does build those walls at either end at 9'8" or 9'1" to keep this simplified, and then you could put a simple truss over it like this. And then look at this door. Right now I have this door, this is open all the way. The ceiling of that office flows out of this door, so keep an eye on that in the film, because I show several alternatives with this door. I mean, and then a similar thing is happening over here, where the hall ceiling, because it's at 8 foot, is coming out, flowing right into this room. You may want those closed down some though. So, or you may want this one actually as a framed opening. That's a 6 foot wide, 5 foot wide, 5 foot wide with doors, either swing doors or pocket doors, as far as that goes. So that's something to think about with that particular door there, what happens with that there. But after that flat ceiling, the next alternative is to use a scissor truss over the whole thing, which should be really comparable in cost to that either way. And then you end up with this sort of a thing where this is a 212 pitch underneath and 412 pitch on top, and you end up with 11 foot 10 to the ceiling, or to the peak of that. And then finally, the final alternative, which I mentioned yesterday, is to stick frame that roof. I sized these. This would take two 9¼ inch LVLs, and that's if we bear at least on the south fireplace wall. When that beam comes through there, we do have to account for the flue from the chimney, but making sure that that's going to be okay, which it looked to me like it would be okay. But if we want to stick frame, then you end up with 14'3" high ceilings in the whole room, and that is a lot of space, but some of that's going to be interrupted by this big chimney coming down through here, which is not shown right here, and that will impact how it feels and so forth. But here you see I've closed this door down now to not flow right out of that room, where this is probably about 7 foot high, and then whether or not we want to do something similar on that end to the hallway as well is another thing to think about. One last thing with regard to how that roof is framed, it's probably going to take 15 trusses, or if it's stick framed, it's going to take this group of materials up here. This group of materials here totals around $2,300, and that means the trusses to be comparable in cost, and that's just for that framing lumber itself. Those trusses have to be about $138 or less for those two to compete. So I don't know what how much those trusses are going to be. I mean, if they are going to be $150, it's $224. So that gives you an idea of how those costs compare. And then I took a film of each of these alternatives from inside, a little short, just a turnaround film of how that space feels with these various treatments. And at the end of the one, once I did to this stick framing, this is what I ran 3 or 4 films because I horsed around with these windows over here. One of the issues with this window that looks out to the north here is that it's too tall. These front ones are fine, but it's too tall, and so I have to keep this roof plane that's over here behind this, I have to keep that up 3 or 4 inches more than I would have to. So with these 8-foot walls back here, you end up with a 14 or 15 inch heel height. So it'd be nice to see this window or something happen with this windows, and that's one of the things I did toward the end of this film is where this window becomes something different from the windows on the east wall. So that's it. These films will just run without commentary, and that'll be it. And I just want to, this is really probably the thing to really think about in terms of structure, for us to make some sort of a break point, a decision point, decide what we're going to do with that ceiling, even if you feel under pressure, decide what you want to happen in there, and then we can begin to build some of the rest of this. These films have labels to the left. This is the one with the 8-foot high ceiling over the kitchen and the 9-foot high ceiling over the balance of the room. And I like this one. And this is B with the 9-foot ceiling flat over the entire area. You can see some things happening with that door to the office and the door to the hallway. C is the scissor truss vaulted ceiling. And finally, D is this stick-framed vaulted ceiling. And there will be various horsing around with these windows and doors. Sorry about that stick up there in the corner. But there'll be various horsings around with the windows and doors at the front and the back, just very briefly.